All right, 1, 2, 3. Welcome back. This is, of course, another fantastic interview. And today we are featuring Mr. Rob Hahn. And a lot of you know Rob as we do from Industry Relations, which is his great podcast. Of course, Rob's been an industry insider since as long as we can remember. And the nice thing about Rob is he offers an insider's perspective on what's good, bad, and indifferent in real estate. And he doesn't do it with any dogs in any particular fights, which I've always appreciated. You know, Julie and I listen to his podcast every week or however frequently they publish. And we always learn. He talks about things that are really relevant to the industry in ways that the industry is not talking about those particular topics. And frankly, the topics that we're going to be talking about today, a lot of the thoughts around those topics, Julie and we've been, germinating after listening to Rob's podcast. So again, definitely listen to it. It's called Industry Relations. So Rob, I want to start out by talking about specifically the article that you just wrote and published with regards to this NAR speech code 1005. And I love that you wrote this article and you're calling NAR out on some of this, let's just be honest, rather politically correct banter that they've been trying to force down on all of us. So what inspired you to write that?
Right.
And what actions should all of us be taking?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, guys. Good to meet you at least over Zoom. In answer to your question, it's 10.5 bothered me the minute it was even proposed. So back in 2020 was when I really kind of did a lot of work on it. And it's not just because I'm a libertarian, right? As if you guys listen to my podcast, I'll talk about I'm an anarcho-capitalist and have crazy political views. But primarily it's because I think freedom is the most important value, if you will, as an American. But even more than that, the idea that a trade organization, right, that was supposedly about professionalism and home ownership, would go out of its way to frankly tell half or more, I actually think it's more than half of the realtor membership that they're scum. Like I just couldn't understand that. I couldn't wrap my head around it, right? And what really triggered me, I suppose, what really ticked me off when it first happened was the case of Brandon Huber, who I've written about. I recorded a podcast with him back in the day, and I've linked all those in my posts that I just put up, right? Where this really felt like an overstep, right? Again, there are cases, and I get it. There was a case that they brought up, and brought up, when the whole 10.5 speech code thing was being discussed, where some pastor somewhere, apparently got on and started, basically saying gays and lesbians are going to hell and they're demons. Like, okay, I get why you might punish somebody for that. This Brandon Huber case was literally his church decided we don't want to participate with a free lunch program because they found, inserts for like Gay Pride Week or month or whatever it was. And they, as a church, decided this is against our values. We're not going to participate. Now, whether you agree or disagree with that, right? And as a libertarian, I'm like, hey, love who you want. Like, that's awesome. But whether that was the case or not, for someone to then bring him up on charges, like, come on, guys. And then when you look through the record, it was because he published a thing on social media saying, hey, our church is going to have an event. We're going to explain like what's going on in the political agenda of the LGBTQ, whatever it was. Again, whether you agree or disagree with him, whether you think he's full of shit and you hate it, okay, cool. But the whole principle of freedom of speech is, the cure for bad speech is like good speech, right? So why not just then say, you know what, we disagree with this. So we're going to have our own event explaining why everything they're saying is full of crap. They didn't do that. They went after him and went after him as a realtor. Right. And went after his business. It pissed me off. It's just not something that a trade organization is supposed to be doing. Right. And, again, over my, whatever, at this point, 15, 16 years of, career in the industry, I've seen NAR go from an organization that I thought was really like working for the good of the members and working for the good of society and of homeownership. And I still remember like 2011, 2012. Right? When they talk about the realtor party, and it's not about Democrat, Republican, it's about the realtor party. To this, like to literally telling your conservative and Christian realtor members that they can go to hell, like that it just was stupid, But, as I wrote in the post, like I haven't really talked about it in the last 4 years, right? Since 2020. Why? Well, because we had a federal government that was all about censorship, that was pressuring companies like social media companies to go silence people for their viewpoints, for their opinions, for facts even. Like, so it's like, what's the point? There's absolutely no point. Well, that changed, on Tuesday. And now I think my premise behind it was, again, I'm not trying to be like political this way or the other thing. It's again, that's not relevant. The relevant part is your trade organization that is under significant attack by the federal government, right, by the policymakers. And the last thing you need to be doing in this new administration is to be seen as an organization that's all about stifling speech. It's all about, crushing its members, and it's all about like telling half its members that they're garbage. Like that's just, again, even if you're like on the other side, you know what I mean? Like even if you're like some complete Democrat left-wing activist, if you're in leadership at NAR, you have to look at this and go, self-preservation dictates that we back off of this, right? Self-preservation dictate, and let's face it, NAR has been really, really wounded. A lot of folks are going, why do I have to, why do I need to keep paying them? Like the Alabama Association of Realtors literally is out there saying, we should get out. Like we should no longer be part of NAR, that sort of thing. You know what? For self-preservation, you need to get rid of speech code. You need to do a whole bunch of other things, but start there, right? As long as you have a 10.5 and a literal speech code that governs how realtor members are going to communicate in their private lives, like, come on, guys. Like, it's just committing suicide. So that's why I wrote that and published that. I'm against speech codes as a matter of principle. So I was offended when they first did it. 4 years later, now I'm pointing out it's still wrong. It was wrong 4 years ago. It's still wrong. But now it's not just wrong, it's stupid. Like you cannot continue maintaining this under the Trump administration, with people like Elon Musk on the team. Like you just can't do it, right? So that's why I published that. And I would love to hear the argument from the other side. I really would. I really would love to hear, now is a great time to have a speech code, right? Like,
I don't think you'll hear that from us.
No, it is. I mean, it is. You're right, though. They're inviting all kinds of litigation because it's obviously a violation of the Second Amendment, And
well,
so,
First Amendment, yeah, but
First
it's
Amendment, yeah.
not only that, but again, it's whether there's litigation or not. Just think about half the country that voted for Trump, right? Half the country that cares about things like freedom of speech. Half the country that are like, I'm being silenced, like what the F, right? And half of them are going to be your realtor members, right? If there's ever a time when you need unity, I would submit that now is it. Again, we could have a conversation as an industry as to what should change, what sort of reforms. Fine, but this is not the time NAR can afford to alienate half of its members, and they're doing that. And to me, because I published an interview with Philip Cantrell, the broker out of Nashville. And I personally saw Philip go from, your typical broker who complains about NAR and, whatever, the bureaucracy and their stupid decisions, et cetera, to somebody who went to NAR is like an active force for evil, right? And big part of it was because of the speech code and the clear message it was sent. And I just think they need to rethink it. They need to do something about it. And I'm saying, look, it's the 8th NAR Next is going on right now as we're recording this. So my call was, hey, leaders of NAR, y'all need to get together and twist whatever arms you need to twist, make some whatever emergency decision, but you probably need to get rid of 10.5 like pronto.
Yeah.
Right now.
Well, exactly. Just to be in alignment with the realities of the new administration and the enforcement that's inevitably going to follow. That makes total sense.
Right.
But aside from that, they're not in alignment. To your point, they're totally not in alignment with obviously the popular vote in the United States. When you saw the electoral map and the popular vote map, the whole country is basically red now. And it's crazy to think that they can maintain any kind of membership levels, ignoring essentially what obviously and agents have always leaned conservative anyway. I mean, if you ever look at.
But here's a comment I'll make on that. Like, again, I don't know. I agree with you. I think agents have tended to lean more conservative because every agent that I know wakes up unemployed, right? So they're all small business people and they all recognize like hard work. Like, hey, man, you want to be successful? like, let's face it, real estate ain't rocket science. I mean, it's not about, well, I know the algorithms for some AI. No, it's hard work. It's making phone calls. It's, door knocking, whatever it is. It's maintaining your sphere. So I think that's one of the reasons. But the other part to me is I don't even think the so-called, like, if you will, the liberal side of things, right? I don't even think most of them are for a free speech code. I just don't. I refuse to believe that even, I don't know, let's say you love national health care and you worry about, like, you want to protect gays and lesbians and, trans rights. Okay, fine. You're whatever, total bleeding heart liberal. Cool. I still don't think most of those people are for, what we should do? We should silence people through our trade organization rules. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think they are. I genuinely don't. I think they would rather be like, let those crazies, then say whatever, and we're then going to counter it, right? We're going to speak up and say, no, you're wrong, or you're this, that, or the other, whatever. And I think that's actually the American way. And the other thing about it is, maybe a trade organization is not the place to get involved in these really contentious, like, social issues, right? And I've seen this firsthand. Like, I kind of mentioned it in my thing. Like, back when I was doing a lot of consulting work for associations, I would go do a strat plan, and, like, here we are, people from all different walks, whatever, right? Different races, different whatever, and we're talking about, like, how do we improve professionalism? And there's a lot of interesting conversation. Hey, how can we communicate the value of a realtor to the community? Lots of, like, wonderful collaboration. And then it's like, so we got to talk about race. And the next thing that happens is people are at each other's throats. Like, why would you want this? Even if you're liberal, even if you're lefty, like, why would you want that? Like, do that outside the association. Do that outside, in the association, you should just be talking about how do we service our clients better? How do we get rid of the unethical agents who are screwing people? Hey, what should we do about the commission rules? Like, talk about the industry, talk about the transaction. Why in the world would you want to bring up, we should talk about abortion? Like, that, it makes no sense to me. Right. And I don't think I'm saying that just because I'm a political libertarian. I really don't. I think that's just, like, common sense. No?
100%. And we always preach to agents to be Republicrats, so they're not either, that way they can basically serve everybody. But it is interesting. I was having that conversation with a gal in San Francisco once on a big Zoom, and she raised her hand. She very thoughtfully said, in my marketplace, if I'm not an absolute, blue person, I'm not going
Right.
to do any transactions. So,
Sure.
I mean, you got to toe the party line where you are.
Sure.
That's unfortunately the truth. So let's move on. You mentioned the commission sharing lawsuits, and that's something that's very interesting. And Julie and I have a lot of opinions on that. Let's see this conversation with the understanding that most people listening to us and watching on YouTube will have some baseline understanding what it is. But if not, let's just give them the, essentially standard fare.
Sure.
And if Julie and I say anything incorrect, feel free to correct us. But under these new guidelines, in essence, every buyer must be working with a buyer with an exclusive buyer agency contract signed that clearly states out, the most controversial aspect of it is how that buyer agent is going to get paid. One of the options is the buyer agent paying their own fee. The buyer agent commission is no longer an entitlement to the transaction. That's the essence of it. And so the buyer's agents, ever since we've been in the business, and really for the last 100 years, we haven't been in the business for 100 years. We're not that old, but ever since we've been in the business, agents for the most part have been operating without buyer agencies signed because, and to be a buyer agent was a lower skill, though higher work. You had to, as Julie says, it's working with buyers is physical labor, working with sellers is more mental labor. It's more professional.
Right.
And now working with buyers is going to be both physical labor and mental labor. So now we're entering into this new year where we're going to see these buyers agents that don't know how to present their value, don't know how to get buyer agency contracts signed. And there's no real knowing of how the enforcement's going to work. I had a conversation with, it ended up being 3 different leaders of real estate brokerages who all were party to the commission sharing lawsuit, all had to dig, checks to basically, get out of the litigation, doing more than $2 billion a year. And I asked them, what are you going to do if there's a commission check that comes in and in the file, there's no exclusive signed and there's no, there's no seller concession where the buyer agent commission was supposed to be included in the transaction and yet the commission was still paid. And two of them didn't, like, they hadn't considered it, Rob, which honestly, I wonder if I was just shocked by that. And the third one told me, he put a lot of thought into it, said, we're gonna have to send the money back because there's not gonna be any well, one of the other brokers insinuated that they're gonna just retroactively go get the paperwork signed, which is again, kind of illegal. But so have you had any conversations like how the industry is actually going to react for the brokerages that are actually paying and agreed to the settlements?
So I've had a few. I wouldn't say I've had as many as, let's say, like James Dwiggins, right? I mean, because he's operating a franchise, he's, I think, more day to day with this. But my overall position on this really hasn't changed very much since. I mean, I've had one major change, which was I thought the commission, because they preserve compensation off the MLS, I thought that's just the way things would go. I turned out to be wrong. That's not what's going to go, right? I think fundamentally it would be easier if we all as an industry understood what the problem was, right? That the settlement was trying to resolve, right? And I've written volumes about it, and I'll keep writing about it. Like we have to get around we have to just kind of take almost like lift up to 30,000 feet and look at what exactly is this all about, right? What exactly this was all about was about steering, right? So no one's like, even the DOJ is like, we don't have a problem with the seller paying for the buyer agent compensation, right? The issue that they were having with it was for 100 years, we had, agents sort of saying, well, if I'm the procuring cost, I get this compensation, I get half the commission, right? So therefore, like, I don't really have to work that hard in proving value. I just have to get someone to help like show them a house and not procuring costs. But the other part of it was because of that, they were doing a lot of stuff like, oh, what your whatever compensation the MLS is not standard, right? So I'm not going to show the house. I'm going to call you and leave angry voicemails. Like, and I bring that up because there's like video of agents actually behaving this way, right?
You mean now, post the commission sharing
No,
lawsuits?
before.
No, before I heard that episode where
Yeah.
you were talking about that.
Exactly, right? So I'm like, look,
fascinating.
that was the problem. And because of that, listing agents were forced to go to their sellers and say, listen, I'm sorry, like I charge 2.5%, but guess what? If you don't offer 2.5% to the buy side, no one's going to show your house. They're going to blacklist you, et cetera. So you got to pay up. Seller's like, all right, I guess I got to pay up, which then kept prices, overall commission prices high, right? 5%, 6%, whatever. So I'm saying, okay, when you get past all the legal arguments, all the whatever, fundamentally was the steering that was the problem, right? Now, here's the thing. Steering is illegal. Steering is unethical. It's against the code of ethics, right? It's illegal because it's a breach of fiduciary duty to your client who is the buyer, right? It is unethical because the code of ethics says you owe a principal, duty to the buyer, right? And yet this just sort of happened. Okay, so fine. Again, we can get into all this stuff. Fundamentally, what this is, get rid of the steering. What does that mean? It means do what I think most buyer agents, even in the old ways, I think behave this way. Right? So I knew a couple of agents who were really, really great buyer agents, really top notch. They never once said, we're not going to go see this house because they're not offering enough. I know that for a fact. They would show me a FISBO if that's what it was, right? And I'd be like, we'll figure it out. Like, but this is the house you need? Okay, well, let's go see it, right? And they would give me advice about whether I should buy this house or that house with zero regard to what they're going to make from it, right? And I'm like, that's, I think, the way that most good agents worked, right? Now, the unfortunate reality is they were able to do that because they have a very thriving business and they didn't need my one transaction, right, to make their mortgage payments. So part of this is all interlinked with the fact that we have 1.6 million realtors, when in reality, we probably should have something like 300,000 realtors. You know what I mean? Like, we just have too many damn agents, and a lot of them are incompetent, they're unethical, and they should not be representing anybody. Like, we all know this, right? So there's a lot around that. So to bring it back to kind of what you're saying, I think if the industry, if brokers and agents just kind of do what's best for the client and without the steering, I think it's all going to kind of work out, right? In other words, the whole like written buyer agreement, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, this is probably something we should have been doing anyway. I like to tell the story when I moved to Texas and I met the buyer agent help me. I call him up like, hey, I saw you on Zillow. I want to go see this house. He refused. Okay. I just want to point that he's like, nah, I don't do that. It's like, let me explain how I work. You and I need to meet. Right? We're going to go have coffee. I want to know about you and your situation. You get to know about me and how I work. And then if after that you want to work with me, then we'll work together. I'll show you all the homes you want. Right. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, like what? You're like turning down business? But that's not what it was. Right. And as a result, he and I built a relationship. And I think he helped me buy that house, helped me sell another house, he helped me buy another house. Like that's a relationship. And I'm saying we should have been doing that anyway. Again, and I don't know what you guys, coach, but I know a lot of brokers, they don't do that aspect because it's harder. And I get it. But you know what? That's enduring. Like you want to, what's the saying in our industry? You got to list to last. Right? I agree with you. Going forward, it's going to have to be representing buyers becomes a little bit more professional. But this isn't some brand new thing that we have to invent all over. This has been going on. Good agents been doing this for years. Right?
Forever.
They refuse to be like some Uber driver, like, come meet me at this house. Oh, I'm gonna run. Like they don't do that. They go, no, no, no. This is a professional relationship. We're going to sit down and get to know each other and then decide we're going to work together. Okay. So the only change that has to happen is as you're doing that, you got to explain to me, the buyer, here's how I get paid. That's
Totally.
it.
I mean, and this is something we teach our, coaching clients to use, and it's basically answering the question.
And we have forever.
Yeah,
Right.
we've used a version of this forever, and basically answers all the questions about why that buyer would choose to work with that particular buyer's agents.
Right.
And the buyer agency thing came online really in the late 90s. And
That's right.
late 90s, that's when everyone was moving towards the idea of having an exclusive sign. But the fact is if you were trying to get an exclusive sign in the industry and the 10 other buyer agents that buyer was also meeting with weren't getting it signed, you did have a competitive disadvantage.
That's right.
And now it's flipped because the agents that know how to actually show their value are the ones that have the advantage. But Rob, I'm genuinely curious what's going to happen as we roll into the new year, as all these agents basically come out of their hidey holes for the spring market to the realization that they now have to have an ability to get an exclusive sign. And they're, Julie and I are seeing happen, we have a podcast and all these other things, and they had no clue how to actually get an exclusive sign. And what effect that's going to have on the industry is going to be profound. The buyer side transaction, like what effect it's going to have on Zillow?
Well, let me ask you something, because here's the thing. One correction I would make is there's no requirement in the settlement or in the law or whatever that you have an exclusive buyer agency agreement. It just says you have to have a written agreement. It doesn't say anything about exclusive.
Which means you get paid, which means you can work with somebody basically and not have an agreement how you're going to get paid, which means
right. So yes, but what I mean is like, so you, in other words, like as a thought experiment, maybe you don't sign an exclusive agreement. You say, you know what, shop around, work with 5 other buyer agents, right, including me, and then let them best agent kind of rise to the top, right? Like, why not? Like, what is the harm there? Right.
Well, I can tell you from somebody who basically made a living selling real estate.
Right.
If you had, I mean, there are some states that have open listing agreements where a seller can list their house with 1 billion other brokers.
Sure. MLSs won't accept those. That's just
well, exactly. But as far as the idea that you're going to spend your time and energy towards somebody that's not willing to commit to you exclusively is futile, because you're going to mostly waste your time.
That's right.
Yes, you're right. I think the lower skilled agents are going to gravitate towards something like that. But to your friend agent in Vegas, he knows his value, and he's not going to give away his time for free.
That's right.
Yeah, and this one-time showing agreement stuff, all these little gray areas and these workarounds are all basically the industry trying to make up for the agent's skills deficit on how to show their value and get the contract signed. And again, what ramification is that going to have on the market come spring market next year? I don't think it's going to be nothing.
Yeah, there will be something, and here's the thing. What I've said a while back is we're not going to know, because this thing is brand new, right? It was in August 17th when this went into effect, right? It's like, okay, well, we've been doing it this way for 100 years. So maybe let's give ourselves a little bit more grace in terms of how much time before we figure out what works, what doesn't. Okay. What I'm suggesting,
well, that's true. Right. And you were talking about 1.6 million licensed realtors. How many of them are part-time and they don't know anything about this because they sell a deal or two a year? or they operate completely off of referral fees and they don't sell anything personally. It hasn't occurred to them to look into it. They don't listen to podcasts. They're not in coaching.
No.
There's a huge, I don't know how many, but it's not nothing. It's probably half of them maybe.
Right.
What's the statistic of, I think more than half of licensees sell 0 to 1 house yearly.
Yeah.
So they're maybe not part of this conversation and
Right.
may not transact for 6 months and then find out the hard way.
That's right.
I suspect when we get fourth quarter numbers, we may already be feeling some of the suppression of sales because of agents who are trying to be transactional, whose reaction to having to have buyer representation signed is just texting over the paperwork saying it's required now, you got to sign it. And then that buyer ghosts them because they have no idea. Nobody's presented to them. They're not articulating their value. And that deal is poof.
Right. No, I think that's going to happen. But I guess what I look at is the way I like to think about things, I go to sort of the fundamentals, right? Okay. So what I've been told by all the great agents that I know, right, and the industry itself, and coaches like yourselves and others, is this is a relationship business. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm gonna take you at your word because I've never sold real estate. It's a relationship business. Okay, then you actually have to build a relationship, right? Here's how you don't build a relationship. It's just human beings, right? You don't build a relationship by like somebody clicked on a website, so therefore I'm gonna run over there and then do whatever, right? And then lie about myself, right? Like pretend I have all these skills that I don't actually have, pretend to give a shit when I don't actually give a shit, and then get paid, right? Like, I'm sorry, that's not a relationship. So just think about it at a human level. What's a relationship? Relationship is kind of what happened with, that agent I was talking about. It's like, no, I have self-respect. I'm just not going to just go running at your beck and clutch just because you've made some Zillow inquiry. We're going to meet. We're going to talk about ourselves. We're going to get to know each other. And then we're going to start working. And by the way, he did have me sign a written buyer agreement. But literally, it was like, anytime you want to out of this, you just let me know. Right?
Yep.
There was none of this like, I own you now for the next 6 months, and you like. There's none of that.
People
And I
don't like
think
that.
that's a relationship.
We call that our love or leave it guarantee.
Right. Like that's a relationship. And guess what? If you do the right thing and you provide the right level of service, which he did, then you know what's going to happen? Like next time I'm calling him. Next time I'm calling him. It's because like that's my agent, right? That's the way people think about their lawyers. That's the way people think about their accountants, about their doctors. That's my lawyer. That's my doctor. That's my accountant. Nobody's going, boy, I need to file my taxes this year. Unless they're using whatever H&R Block, right? You know what I mean? Like, and that I think is the big bifurcation that needs to happen in our industry, right?
It's going to happen.
It's going to
happening
happen.
now.
It's not whether you or I or whatever. It's going to happen because that's human nature, right? Okay, well, in that journey, the thing that kind of frustrates me is some of the messaging over the last year, let's say, as we were anticipating these changes coming, was everybody's talking about show your value. How do you communicate your value? How do you show your value? And nobody's talking about get some value. So quite frankly, if you're brand new, you just got your license last week and you don't know a motherfucking thing about client service, about real estate, about housing, about zoning laws, about none of it, then your first job is to get some value. And that's whether that's through training or reading or whatever, joining somebody's team, working as a transaction coordinator, so you like learn the ins and outs of whatever it is. Like that's the piece that I think we don't talk about enough. Like if you have no value, then you can't show shit. That's not a lie, right? Like, and so many of the people out there are just straight up lying.
So I'm going to interrupt you because I really like what you're saying, and I'm really going to drill down on something because that bothers the hell out of Julie and I as well.
Yeah.
So much of the industry in the last 15 years has been trying to get beating agents over the head to build their brand and do all this and do the rest of it. And the word, like I suspect we're all in the same age bracket, right? Generation X. So back when we were kids, it was called your reputation. But your reputation comes from essentially having done the work for a long period of time at a high level and been successful more often than not. And nowadays, all these people come into the industry and they're being told that they can build their reputation from essentially spending money on building their brand, and they're conflating branding and reputation. Have you ever considered that? So
I've been told, no, I've been bitching about this for forever.
It's disgusting. It's such a lie.
Yeah. And a brand is a promise, right? And it's all these other things. Like, so I think about it any other profession. Any other profession. Like, so, like realtors often like say, you're not gonna go for the cheapest guy when you need brain surgery. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, you're right. But let's think about what a brain surgeon actually has to do to get to that point, right?
Hmm.
For that matter, let's say you graduate top of your class, Harvard Law School. Okay. Well, Yale Law School, right? Let's say you did, all right?
I think he's bragging. You're a lawyer.
No, no, I went to NYU, so
Oh,
it's
okay.
just. But as a Yale, I got to bash on Harvard a little bit. But
See, told you.
right, let's say you did, okay, and you graduate your first year law student, right? You have zero value. I'm just telling, like literally, as I was interviewing with firms, they all said the first 2 years of a lawyer, they're worth zero. Like they're actually worth less than zero because we got to pay them. So why do you
No
do
wonder.
it? Because after they get that experience, then they're worth something to us, right? Okay, if we recognize about lawyers, about doctors, the first time, first, like, okay, you got your medical degree, you're not a hospital, all the nurses know way more than you. Like my doctor friends all tell me that. It takes them time to get the experience to get, okay, cool. Why aren't we applying that to real estate? Why is it that we have so many brokers and coaches and agents out there? Like,
Answer the question. But answer the question.
I do
Why?
think
honestly, okay, so this
Because
it's
we don't
because,
Jules and I don't take that stance.
right.
And
And
we
the great
honestly don't.
coaches don't. Right? But
But
here's
it
the
makes
reason. Here's the answer. The answer is because we had this commission sharing system for 100 years.
well, okay. So the answer is also because the brokers don't know any better because they've only come up in the last 15 years and they don't want to tell
Right, right.
and
That may be it.
they don't want to tell agents that they have to do what they don't want to do and they
Right,
don't want to do at the
right,
highest level to actually earn a reputation because
right,
nobody wants to hear that.
right. So, a few years back, my wife, Sunny, she's a recovering broker, right? And I came up with this like law firm concept for a brokerage firm, right? But a big part of it was I genuinely believe this. So if anybody's listening, maybe you could tell me how wrong I am, but that's fine. But I genuinely think when it's all said and done, where this will go is brand new licensees who are coming into brokerage will come in as like transaction coordinators or sales coordinators, like administrative positions, so they could learn the skills, like learn what a contract is, learn how to do an open house, learn how to put a yard sign, like learn the basic skills, learn how to do a CMA by doing it for more senior people, right? Tag along with the senior agent when they're doing a listing presentation so you learn a little bit. Like it's not just about like the classes and come to our training session. Nobody actually learns shit from a training session. Do you know what I mean? You learn by doing, and that's just basics. Like I'm a competitive shooter. Right? I'll go take a class. I don't leave the class a better shooter. I leave the class knowing what I have to go practice. Right? I think it's gonna go that way. But the good news is the top tier agents who kind of know what they're doing, they already have value. I've spent 15 years selling in this market. I know the ins and outs. I know the zoning laws. I know the builders who built on that street. That builder was really great. The builders who built on this street, not so great. Like those people have tremendous value. For them to show their value, it's really not that hard. You don't need some marketing guru to tell you, like, here's how you need to brand yourself. Like, motherfucker, I've been doing this for 15 years. I know what I'm doing. Like, you know what I mean? It just kind of rolls off of them. I don't think those people have anything to worry about.
Do you think it's Julie, I think that's
Sorry.
you. Yeah.
I
Do you
got it.
think that's Rob, do you think it's unethical that the industry basically is beating that branding and marketing opposed over skills message?
Of
So
course.
it's
Of course.
unethical,
And
right?
short-sighted.
Yeah.
It's worse than unethical. It's short-sighted. Like what's the thing? Like worse than being immoral is to like be stupid or something. You know what I mean? Like if we think about it, the way that this industry will move forward and has to go, especially once this like commission sharing thing has been smashed, is we have to then now value skill and expertise and wisdom, right? Because that's a huge part of being a real estate agent. That just gets I don't think it's talked about enough, right? It's not about like you have access to data. Like everyone has access to data.
Yeah.
I can run a comp for you. Like honestly, it's not that complicated. It's not that. A huge part of what an agent, the value of the agent is the wisdom, right? When the buyer's saying, okay, well, these three houses all look really great to me, which one should I get, right? Or man, that house is really awesome, but it's 30,000 more than I got right now, right? it's the wisdom for that agent to be like, listen, I know it's $30,000 more, and whatever. If I got to give up some of my commission to make you do this deal, so you know I'm not doing this for myself, but you should buy this house because this house will appreciate. It'll be worth triple, whatever. Like, this is a great opportunity. You should get this. Do you know what I mean? Like, or between these three houses, I really like this one. Why?
But,
Because your family is this. It's the wisdom, right?
but you're going back to that's the type of, and this is 100% in alignment with what we think too.
Yeah.
And again, Julie and I kind of approach things from there's a proactive, it always comes down to lead generation for agents, right?
Of course.
You ever ask agents what they want to talk about, it's lead generation. So it's proactive lead generation, there's passive lead generation. Proactive lead generation is actually, doing the real work of real estate, having real meaningful conversations. In order to do that, you actually do have to have some wisdom. It can be learned and it can be earned. You can do it both ways, learning on the job, obviously. But the industry gravitates towards the passive lead generation, where the industry has been fooled. Most agents have been fooled into believing that they can skip the real work aspect, and somehow that's going to get them into the finish line. And then that's soul crushing for us to see, because agents fail so quickly. But the real adverse effect is on the essentially the buyers and the sellers out there. Oh, Rob had all these fancy TikToks where he's dancing to all of his, whatever. And I just decided, I mean, that the agents have been lied to essentially about what is a true professional.
Of course.
But why isn't anybody talking about this?
I think people are talking, we're talking about it. I think people are talking about it. And I think what's going to happen over the next, say, year, right, is we're going to see the marketplace truly react and respond, right? And again, this is not, the big challenge here, quite frankly, is the fact that, buyers agents for the first time have to go and start saying, my fee is $15,000. Right, with the buyer, and the buyer's going to go, what are you going to do for me? Like, why am I paying that much money? Tell me why you're worth $15,000. And that's why people are like, it's just showing your value. Hey man, maybe the better thing to do is like, my fee is $500 because I just got my license last week and I don't know shit. Right, be honest and authentic. I don't know anything, but Mr. Buyer, I'm going to work real hard for you. Like,
so one of the things that we're teaching agents to do is, it just as if you were working with the seller, you're going to have to explain why you're better, not just because you do these things in the community and because you're a nice guy and because you have a golden retriever. You're going to have to show them that you're better by showing them actual facts. This is my list to sell price ratio. This is my average days in the market. These are the things. The buyer side of the industry has never had to do that. So we've created essentially taking what we've learned from teaching agents forever how to be great listing agents, and we're applying that same logic to the buyer side. So you work with me, you find a house you want to purchase, then this is my average list price to accomplished price, final price ratio. Those types of conversations is what you're expressing needs to start happening in the industry.
So what I'm suggesting is, of course, all of that's going to happen. What I'm suggesting is, if you are new, if you are inexperienced, if you don't have those skills, then just be cheaper. Price competition exists in every industry, right? If you're a brand new lawyer, you don't get to charge $1,000 an hour. You have to charge $100 an hour.
Well, I have to jump in and point out one thing that we deal with in coaching, which I call, what you're talking about is an experience deficit.
Sure.
Or a value deficit until they get the skill. Okay.
That's right.
So there are ways to defeat that. One of the things that we coach is, how about the beyond the MLS search guarantee? Learn how to find inventory that's not just some drip system that your client can set up on Zillow themselves, right? Sure. There are some tools that even a less experienced agent can, get value from, but they have to be aware that they need it. Otherwise, they're either going to be cheap or free, and they're going to be a statistic and not even be in business after a while.
I mean, I agree with that. All I'm suggesting is a slightly different approach to this, right? Meaning, and this is, like, my heart is not going to break. I'm not going to cry if that means that the part-time agent who just got a license is like, okay, well, if I fall into a deal, then great, I'm going to make 15 grand, right? If all of those people cannot make a living, if they can't do any transaction or business, honestly, my heart's not going to be breaking. But the agents who are saying, I want to make this a career, right? I genuinely care about serving my community, serving buyers and sellers. Like, okay, cool, but you have no experience. You know what? Work for less, join a team, charge $50 an hour instead of, 2.5%, whatever you got to do and get that experience.
Like the apprentice attorney
Correct. And guess what? You do 10 of those deals. You now have some experience. Now you have some value. You don't have to keep doing that. Now you can be like, listen, I don't just run around and show houses. I'm not an Uber agent, right? I'm, you want to work with me? We need to meet. We need to get to know each other. And at the end of that meeting, by the way, I may decide I don't think I'm the right fit for you because I work in this way. And I think you need someone that works in this other way. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
you need to get to that point. And my point is, as an agent, you had to somehow get the experience, get the value to get to that point. This
Yes,
is
well,
where
it's called
brokerage
real
comes
estate
in.
practice for that reason.
Correct. And this is where brokers come in. This is where business models come in. This is where all of those come in. Because in the current way we do things in our industry, boy, that's a tough one. Because, okay, you're an agent with a broker. You're not getting paid. It's all, you what you kill business. Like, how many young people, how many new agents can actually survive that? Right? They can't, which is why I'm an advocate for W-2. If that agent is smart, young, or smart, whatever, and it's like you want to make this a career as a broker, why wouldn't I want to say, you know what, I'm going to guarantee that you can make a living. Right? And along the way, you're going to learn a tremendous amount, but you're not really that valuable right now. So we're going to have to bill you out at this much lower rate, right? But at some point, I expect that you're going to get to this point, and then you're going to start generating tremendous value for us. Like, I think that's where I think the industry will move ultimately, because it's not about the settlement this, settlement that, or this little rule here. It's just like human nature and just business in general, right? Like, as agents, like, no agent's gonna go out there and be like, I'm gonna hire this attorney to draft, I don't know, my corporate documents, and he's gonna charge me $1,500 an hour, even though nobody's doing that. Nobody's been like, I'm gonna hire this H&R Block and I pay them the same that I'm gonna pay Ernst and Young. Nobody does that in our lives, right? And I was just saying the same thing's gonna happen with real estate service.
It
The
makes
top,
sense, but ultimately market forces will set whatever anyone's rate is. I mean, that's
that's
all.
actually right. That's correct. That's
Yeah.
correct.
So for an agent to think they can only, a new agent and I'll just give you this counter, thought, there's zero chance that the industry will survive without, a billion new agents coming and going. There's a
Of
30,
course.
30% churn rate, but if you look at where a lot of brokerages make, frankly, a lot of money is charging a monthly fee.
Right.
If without monthly, like an agent doing no transactions is still going to pay,
Right.
$100 a month or whatever it
Right.
is, that adds
Right.
up.
And all of that, we're going to see how that all sorts out with this new environment, right? So, like some of the critiques of of the settlement, the critiques of things, I'm like, give it some time. I mean, like, it's a little early, right? Give it some time. Let's see how this plays out. What I'm suggesting, the way it's going to play out is ultimately this will drive the industry towards greater professionalism at the top and essentially employee apprentice at the bottom. And I think we're going to see a dramatic reduction in numbers, which I think is actually good for everybody. You know, like,
Explain why you think it's going to be a dramatic reduction in numbers, because everyone's been predicting that since Julie and I got in the business over 30 years ago, and it's never
right.
happened. And
Well, it's never happened because we had the commission sharing system. So somebody with no experience, if you luck out and happen to show a house to somebody, now you have procuring costs for half the commission, right? That I think is going away. I'm sorry, like, and there's some whole reasons why. Like, as a
oh, it's
listing
going
agent,
away for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
as a listing agent, I'm gonna walk in, so I'm one of the experienced. I have some value now. Now I'm in the listing business, I'm gonna walk in and say, listen, my commission is 6% because we have to offer half to the other side. Meanwhile, my competitors walk in and say, my commission is 2.5%, and then we'll see what the other side is, right? And all the conversation industry about, instead of playing these stupid games and mowing 3% into the lawn, and instead of all that shit, how about my client is willing to consider whatever offer? Put in the offer. Just put in the offer,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, through
Well,
conception.
listing agents are loving this.
Of
Yeah.
course, right? Just put in the offer. And here's the thing: that goes back to kind of what we talked about, right? Great buyer agents would have done that anyway. They're not going to steer their buyer away. Like, they're just not like, this is the right home for you. Let's get you into the right home. Right. And if that means I have to take a loss, maybe I don't make as much money on this deal by my servicing you that way. I'm fine financially because I have 25 other closings I'm going to do this year. But that now means you're going to tell all your friends and neighbors about me.
Rob, let's talk about something. You said it twice, and there is some historical precedent for lower buyer agent commissions adversely affecting the sellability of a property. And Julie's the numbers person here, so she'll remember all this,
Mhm.
hopefully. Julie, do you remember, we talked about this in the podcast before, like when Zillow was doing their iBuyer and when that was still around? Okay,
Yeah.
Rob's.
Whoops.
And they were seeing how low they could go without
Yeah.
adversely affecting the sellability, and they got down to 1.7%. And then all of a sudden their days on the market started to extend. Do you remember all that?
Yeah, they've written about this publicly, that I think it was in Atlanta. They were studying quarter by quarter, they would lower it and lower it. And I think they got to about 1.75 to 2.
Mhm.
And then things stopped getting shown. But they were studying how low they could run the buyer side commission down.
Right. Right.
So, I think there is certainly pressure. And it comes down to what you said, that it's to us as coaches who have always taught this. And when we were selling real estate, we used a buyer presentation that the culmination at the end, the big close where they were signing, was the result of a great presentation.
That's right.
That's what we've always believed. And for us, all the result of the lawsuits is a systematic, increase in professionalism that's required. And not everyone will survive that. It'll be interesting to see what happens between here, or really between August 17th and when this becomes a standardized professional approach.
Mm-hmm.
I talk to coaching clients like, if you had a toothache and you called your dentist and you said, hey, I got this filling falling out, and they're like, come and meet me on the golf course, come on over.
Right.
Are you really going to trust that dentist?
Right.
It's not the same. And Howard Britton used to call Pop-Tart agents that would just go and show anything and not have those conversations. And, one of the reasons that they weren't getting the commitment signed is because they weren't having presentations. And to your point, they weren't having the actual nurtured relationship. Sure. and showing their value. So I agree with you that there will be some fallout. I don't know how much and how quickly, but I think it's refreshing to have that level of professionalism coming on the buyer side. And we hear from coaching clients that are like, hey, you know what? I did the presentation and it went smoothly and everything's great. And we're going to go and see houses this weekend. And I really feel good about this client. I pre-qualified them. They asked me questions. So we're excited about that in spite of all of the massive amounts of confusion and consternation that we're living around right now.
Sure.
So who's going to police all this? Like so the brokerage that are less than 2 billion that aren't real parties, where the MLSs are supposed to doing the policing. How is that going to work exactly?
I don't know, man. The thing that I'm looking at right now is I think the MLS as we know it is dead, and we just don't know it yet. Right? And inertia is going to carry it through for a couple more years, right? So I brought this up recently at a big event at a bunch of agents room, and I could hear the audible gasps, right? Because a lot of folks are now going, well, what do I need an NAR for? What do I need to belong to the Realtor Association, right? So there's a lot of resistance, which we talked about, which is one of the reasons why NAR needs to repeal the damn speech code instantly. But there's a second part of it, which is like, what do you need the MLS for, right? And it's one of those questions that agents have never asked, right? And I get why, because when the MLS is guaranteeing compensation, of course you need the MLS. You'd be a fool, right? But MLS guarantee compensation. Okay, well, the MLS doesn't do that anymore. So what do you need the MLS for?
We don't have one in Puerto Rico, and houses are still selling.
Right? It's like, no matter, even if you remember the MLS as a buyer agent, guess what? You're probably going to call the listing agent now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just for, hey, are you guys doing concession? What's going on? It's like, and then what you're going to hear is just put in the offer. I'm like, okay, so what do you need it for? And dude, it's like this mind-blowing, people have never even asked that question. And I'm like, look, over the next year or two, people are going to start asking that question. What do I need it for? And if that's the primary enforcement vehicle, we're gonna have some issues. We're going to have to figure out some other enforcement vehicle. Ultimately, though, I guess I'm not as concerned about the enforcement, because I don't really think it's about we're so rules focused. We're so obsessed with the rule said this, rule said that. I have to use this form. I'm like, if you step away from that and go back to kind of what most of our conversation is about, which is, how do I provide excellent client service to my client,